Hello. I don't know why I say that so funny, but I listen to this podcast and that drives me crazy too. So if it drives you crazy, I don't know what to tell you. But I'm glad you came back. Or if you're just joining us, there are a lot of chapters before this one that will help you understand this one. And I suggest you go listen to those. But we are in Exodus chapter 11. Exodus chapter 11 is about judgment, and so is chapter 12, but we're also going to incorporate some Romans 9, 10, and 11. I'm getting ready to do Romans. Those are my notes. uh, there's a lot in Romans, but knowing Exodus will help you understand Romans because we're going to link all this whole chapter is, let's see here, what is it, 10 verses, but we're going to jump thousands of years into the future, and we're going to link this to Jesus, and what happened to him is the shadow of or Exodus 11 is the shadow of what we're going to see when Jesus is crucified. So if you've not studied that part of it, this is pretty interesting, I think. I think it's very interesting, but let's jump right into it. Exodus chapter 11. And I'm reading from the Complete Jewish Bible because it's very important that we know what God did versus what somebody else did or what we think somebody else did. Those are important. So, verse 1, Adonai said to Moshe, I'm going to bring still one more plague on Pharaoh in Egypt, and after that, he will let you leave here. When he does let you go, he will throw you out completely. Now tell the people that every man is to ask his neighbor and every woman her neighbor for gold and silver jewelry. Remember, women couldn't talk to men, men didn't talk to women. That kind of stuff didn't happen in this society. They were they were about that, honor and men and women not mixing that weren't related or married or something like that. So that's why it says it that way. Adonai made the Egyptians favorably disposed toward the people. Moreover, Moshe was regarded by Pharaoh's servants and the people as a very great man in the land of Egypt. Because remember, they suffered a lot of this stuff. So they weren't necessarily agreeing with the Pharaoh. So Moshe says, here's what Adonai says. About midnight, I will go out in Egypt, and all the firstborn in the land of Egypt will die, from the firstborn of Pharaoh sitting on his throne to the firstborn of the slave girl in the handmill, and all the firstborn of the livestock. Not the angel of death or whatever maybe you've been told, but Adonai does this. He will take the life of the firstborn. There will be a horrendous wailing throughout the land of Egypt. There has never been another like it, and there never will be again. But not even a dog's growl will be heard against any of the people of Israel, neither against people nor against animals. In this way, you will realize that Adonai distinguishes between Egyptians and Israel. All your servants will come down to me, prostrate themselves before me, and say, Get out, you and all the people who follow you. And after that, I will go out. And he went out from Pharaoh in the heat of anger. Adonai said to Moshe, Pharaoh will not listen to you, so that still more of my wonders will be shown in the land of Egypt. Moshe and Aaron did all these wonders before Pharaoh, but Adonai had made Pharaoh hard-hearted, and he didn't let the people of Israel leave his land. So, a lot of us get frustrated when things don't work out the way we want them to work out. But imagine God's telling you to do something, and he says, hey, the first 10 times, nobody's going to listen to you. Everybody's going to hate you early on because they think you're lying or you're making it up or whatever. And but I want you to keep doing it. Do we have the obedience and the faith to just keep doing it and saying, hey, if I'm climbing up a mountain of sand, I'm climbing up a mountain of sand, but God told me to do it, so I'm going to do it. So if you were maybe told, and I saw a video about this the other day, it's like, we should not judge. We're going to be judged. If you are a Christian and you've made that choice, then you're still going to be judged. If you've not made that choice, you're still going to be judged. And we're going to look at that right now. So if we trust Yahweh through Yeshua, we're not going to be condemned, but we are going to be judged. If not, then we will be. Those are the two choices we have. We talk about Jesus is the way. There's only one way. There's two ways to end things for us, either through Yeshua or we're condemned. Those are your choices. So this 10th stroke is not another warning. It's a judgment. And I've interchanged the word stroke and plague, and that's not really important. I just want you to see it in a little different way rather than just these are things that happened. But the 10th plague is really a shadow of what happens when we die. Some will live in darkness and some will live in light, or that's the Hebrew word for light, that enlightenment. Moses tells Pharaoh that night all of Egypt's firstborn would die. It was Yahweh who took all those lives. God, not an angel of death, not something else. In verse 4, it says, here's what Yahweh says. About midnight, I will go out and kill all the firstborn of Egypt. So the Hebrews found favor in the eyes of the Egyptians to this very day, too. Well, not quite common now, but over the last 100 years or 50 years or so, they will still file a suit in the world court to get this money back. They say the Israelites stole from them. The problem with that case is if they made it official and say, yeah, Israel does owe that money, then they validated this story. So that's their struggle. They want the money, but they don't want to validate this struggle or this story. So I always get a kick out of that. This is all done, God says, in order that you may know that Yahweh makes a distinction between Egypt and Israel. Egypt represents the world, all those not joined to Israel. So if we weren't in Goshen and joined to Israel, which a lot of Egyptians did at the time, we would suffer the consequences because God sees the world as Israel and everybody else. That's the way he set it up. So Romans 9, 10, 11 cover, a lot of this in great detail, the grafting in part, but it can be summed up basically by Romans 11, 17, where Paul says, but if some of the branches were broken off and you, Gentile believer, a wild olive were grafted in among them and have become equal sharers in the rich root of the olive tree. And then a little further down in Romans 11, 24, for if you, Gentiles, were cut out of what is by nature a wild olive tree and grafted, contrary to nature, into a cultivated olive tree, Israel, how much more will these natural branches, these Israelites cut off because of disbelief, be grafted back into their own olive tree? See, God didn't give his covenants to Gentiles. Maybe you've heard this in church, or I know there are certain sections of the church that believe this, that the New Testament, the New Covenant was given to Gentiles, but that's not in the Bible. You can look it up. It's just not. Every one of God's covenants have been given to Israelites. So our choice is be grafted in or not. So, and you say, but wait, I thought Jesus ended that distinction. Nope. The world is still divided between Israel and the world. That's just how God sees it. So he provided a new way for Gentiles to be grafted in to Israel's covenants by means of his own blood. That's how he did it. It's not that he changed the covenants. What he did was provide a new way for us to do it, a way that far exceeded the previous ways for you to join Israel, because you had to be circumcised, you had to do all these other things. So Jesus provided a way to accept the work that he did as our way to be grafted into those covenants. I know it's a little complicated, but I promise it'll make sense in hopefully a couple of seconds. Even the new covenant was not a covenant between God and Gentiles. It was a covenant with Israel. So it was during these 3 days of darkness that, and darkness is hosek, the Hebrew word. It's that evil, that thick darkness, that Moses pronounced to Pharaoh the coming death of the firstborn. So while all of that was going on is when Moshe went in and talked to the Pharaoh. So Israel was celebrating because they were experiencing light. They knew the time of deliverance was near. And this is really important. So in fact, during that time of darkness for Egypt, Israel had already picked out its Passover lamb because Moshe had told them all to do this. So fast forward 1400 years to 30 AD. This is when Yeshua starts his ministry on earth. So he's completed his Passover meal with his 12 disciples and the evening before, and is now nailed. I said he just started it, but obviously not. This is right before he's crucified, but I got the dates mixed up. So he completed his Passover meal with his 12 disciples the evening before, and now is nailed, bleeding and suffocating on the execution stake. And this is what happens. But before death, the land was covered with this thick, terrifying darkness. Do you remember reading that in the New Testament? This is where the shadow of it in Exodus is. So Yeshua, our Passover lamb, was selected and sacrificed when it was dark, literally and spiritually, for the world. Yet in heaven, there was joy, just like in Goshen. There should have been great celebration in Jerusalem, but they did not see that Christ was their deliverance. He was their Passover lamb. They just didn't, a lot of people didn't make that connection. So fast forward another 2,000 years to now, a little bit more than 2,000 years. It's hard not to feel hopeless in this world when we have all this stuff going on. You turn on the news for 30 seconds and you're either mad or depressed or whatever. But as believers, we're set apart and sanctified for God. So what should our reaction be? The same as the Israelites. We should be celebrating that our deliverance is coming. This is one of the things that drives me crazy about Christians or church people, is sometimes we walk around like we're mad at the world. We're so sad and anxious and fearful and worried all the time. God wants us celebrating that Passover because the people that are in the dark need to see that light to go to it. If we go out in darkness, what good is that? How does that bring people in? So the example is right here in Exodus, how we're supposed to live. Like the Israelites, we all have friends that have chosen to join with the world, and that's why we need to share the gospel. Because if we don't share that light, they stay in the darkness. So you have to really hate someone to leave them in this kind of darkness. It's just not what God intended for us to do. And if you hadn't seen Exodus chapter 11, you may not know what some of this is going to look like. So that's Exodus chapter 11. We'll jump into chapter 12 next. God bless. Love God, love people, and change the world.